And are we online? So Stephen's online? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. Bulavanaka, kia ora ana tātou katoa, and warm Pacific greetings to everyone who is here today. Welcome to the final day of our Pacific Update Conference and to our Pacific Migration Workshop. I'm Charlotte Bedford. I'm a research fellow at the Development Policy Centre at ANU, working in Pacific labour mobility. And I want to thank you all for taking the time to attend and contribute to today's workshop. As Stephen mentioned in his address on Tuesday, this is our 5th year of dedicating an entire day of the Pacific Update Conference to migration, in recognition of the growing importance of both temporary and permanent pathways in the region, and the extensive research that is being undertaken in this area. We have a really full program today, with panel sessions covering socio-economic dimensions of temporary labour mobility, reproductive health for people participating in Australia's PALM scheme, the Pacific diaspora in Australia, and the Cook Islands model of free association with New Zealand. And we conclude the day with a session on new developments in regional migration, including the Pacific Engagement Visa and the development of the Pacific Regional Labour Mobility Principles by the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat and the IOM. But before we commence the panel sessions, we have 2 keynote addresses to open today's workshop. The first is by Ms. Jan Hutton, who is First Assistant Secretary of the Pacific Integration Division in the Office of the Pacific at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Jan leads on Australia's Pacific-facing temporary mobility and migration programs, including the PALM scheme, Pacific Engagement Visa, Family Accompaniment, and the Whalapili Union. Jan held a labour mobility roundtable at the Australian High Commission yesterday, which has received a lot of coverage in the local media. And today she will be discussing the overall strengthening of Pacific integration through migration, including opportunities for freer movement in the region. And our second speaker, Mrs. Christina Morau, is the Director of the Solomon Islands Labour Mobility Unit. She'll be talking to us about some of the achievements, issues, and the outlook for labour mobility for the Solomon Islands. So I will introduce each of our keynote speakers ahead of their presentations, and they will then have 20 minutes to address the conference, and we will have time for a few questions at the end of each presentation. So to begin, I would like to introduce Ms. Jan Hutton, who, as mentioned, is First Assistant Secretary of the Pacific Integration Division at DFAT. The Pacific Integration Division leads PALM scheme strategic policy, engagement with participating countries, and design of new commitments, including skills development pilots. The division also covers Pacific education and skills programs in the Pacific Engagement Visa. Ms. Hutton was formerly the First Assistant Secretary for the US and Indo-Pacific Division. In her 20+ years with DFAT, Jan has worked across the department's foreign, trade, climate, and consular policy areas, advancing some of Australia's most important relationships. Jan has served overseas as the Congressional Counsellor in Washington, DC, in Australia's mission to the EU, and as a peace monitor in Papua New Guinea. I'll now hand over to Jan for her presentation.
Bulavanaka, and good morning, everyone. In Australia, like in Fiji and across the Pacific, we continue one of the oldest diplomatic traditions in human history by acknowledging custodians of country, of the lands as we enter, to seek safe passage and recognise the traditional owners. In that spirit, and noting that this week in Australia, we're marking National Reconciliation Week, allow me to acknowledge the Tui Suva, on whose ancestral lands we're gathered here today. Now, apologies, I have a rather formal speech I need to get through this morning, but I suspect most of you are more interested in the Q&A, so I'll try my best to get through it and be as exciting as I can. I'm glad Charlotte, stopped at 20 plus years. They're being kind to me. Can I begin, though, first of all, by acknowledging the University of the South Pacific and the ANU for hosting this year's update. It really is such a magnificent event. I've heard a lot about it over the years and delighted that it's my first time to participate. So thank you. Thank you to Dr. Bedford and others involved in organising today's Pacific Migration Research Workshop. I know just how much work goes into organising these things. And of course, Ms. Christiane, it's so lovely to see you again. We met for the first time last year at the annual Labour Mobility Conference. I really am delighted to be able to discuss today strengthening Pacific integration through human mobility. As Dr. Bedford mentioned, I lead DFAT's work in support of Pacific integration, and it's no coincidence that our mobility and migration programs are located within my division. Thank you. As Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong said here in Fiji just a fortnight ago when she was on her first overseas visit since being reappointed, Australia takes its membership of the Pacific family seriously. We recognise our responsibility as well as our friendships and our partnerships. We've heard the calls from the Pacific for greater access and easier movement around the region, including with Australia. Deepening connections in the region through our peoples is a priority for Australia too. We know that human mobility creates economic and social opportunities. It strengthens the connections between our people, cultures and countries. It makes us family. That's why the Australian government has made it easier for Pacific Islanders to travel to Australia, whether for business, to visit loved ones, or should they wish, to live, work and study. We're proud that we offer the Pacific privileged access to Australia. The centrepiece of our mobility initiatives is the Pacific Engagement Visa. We call it the PEV. The PEV is unique to the Pacific and it embodies our understanding of what it means to be family. It's a groundbreaking initiative offering up to 3,000 permanent residence visas annually for eligible Pacific and Timor-Leste citizens. The PEV offers unprecedented access for Pacific nationals to Australia. PEV holders and their families are accessing Australian education and healthcare systems in the same way and at the same cost as Australians. They're eligible for Australian government benefits, including family tax benefit, our childcare subsidy, as well as the same financial supports for study and training as Australian students receive. We're still in the first year of our PEV program, with the inaugural ballot held in June late last year. Interest in this was incredibly high, not unexpected from us at all. There are over 56,000 primary registrants. This demonstrated to us the keen appetite from the region for deeper connections with Australia. Our first PEV holders and their families are arriving in Australia. I really love hearing the stories about their life-changing experiences. I was told a story of a PEV holder, Tomasi from Tonga, who recently arrived in Sydney with his family. Tomasi himself said being selected through the ballot and granted the visa was life-changing for us. Compared to other migration pathways, which were expensive and complex, this gave us a clear way forward as a family. Resettling in Australia came with its own challenges, but the support we received made a big difference. Having access to Medicare, guidance during the transition, and a support network made it easier to settle in. Today, I'm proud to be here with my family. I carry our values with me: respect, resilience, and the belief that we, as Pacific Islanders, belong in every space. I mean, who can say it better than that, right? That captures it perfectly. Australia is committed to ensuring the PEV program continues to respond to the interests of the Pacific. As with all new programs, though, we are experiencing some challenges and we're working really hard to respond to them. We've invested more money in the PEV support service, which we stood up in the Pacific Island countries that are participating in the PEV program, so that it can better help people to understand the visa process and requirements, to find a job and prepare applicants to settle in Australia. We're also working with Pacific Island governments to address what we think of as systemic issues, and that includes the need for people to be able to obtain the official documentation that they need in order to submit a visa application. As we move into the second year of the PEV program, we'll continue to work hard to ensure the PEV's success. We want this program to grow our Pacific diaspora in Australia, to boost remittance flows to Pacific countries, to strengthen linkages between our people and encourage greater cultural, business, economic and educational exchanges within the Pacific. The Pacific Australian Labour Mobility Scheme, or PALM, continues to be a central pillar of Australia's mobility offering to the region. PALM is unique to the Pacific and Timor-Leste. As the Foreign Minister said here again in Suva just a fortnight ago, PALM's not just about the provision of labour to Australia. For me, PALM is a really unique program. I always describe it as a win-win-win. It is absolutely a win for Australia. It provides access to reliable and productive labour, particularly in our rural and regional communities. It enriches our communities. PALM workers volunteer in our community organisations, such as our local fire brigades. They attend our churches, and dare I admit, they strengthen our prowess on the sporting field. PALM's also a win for individual workers, their families and communities. Right now, over 30,000 PALM scheme workers are, on average, remitting 1,500 Australian dollars a month to their families and communities back home. PALM workers are earning up to 9 to 10 times more than they're able to earn in their home countries. One of the statistics that I'm really proud of is that over 80% of our female PALM workers report greater agency and control over financial resources upon their return home. PALM's also a win for our participating countries. Remittances account for up to 40% of GDP in some cases. Here in Fiji, it's around 9% of GDP. But it's more than just remittances. We're very proud of the fact that the Australian government has embedded a skills dividend in our labour mobility scheme. This is a unique feature of our scheme alone. For example, the Australian government is committed to support 1,500 PALM workers obtain formal qualifications in priority sectors of growth for the region. We've currently trained more than 600. By embedding a skills dividend, we've broadened the value proposition of PALM so that countries can use it to strengthen their own domestic labour markets. This goes to the heart of what the Australian government is committed to doing under PALM. We're investing $440 million to grow and strengthen PALM. We want to create more opportunities for our PALM partners and their people. It will always be a sovereign decision on whether countries wish to participate in PALM. Increasingly, countries can also choose how they wish to participate, making decisions on participation that reflect their own labour mobility priorities and aspirations. PALM now offers more opportunities in different parts of Australia's economy and at higher skill levels, such as aged care, tourism, hospitality and meatworks. Earlier this year, we were so pleased and so proud to welcome our first early childhood workers from PNG to the Northern Territory. We want to ensure that when workers return home, they bring not only remittances, but also new skills so they can make a positive contribution to their home economies. As such, we are investing in reintegration programs and efforts. The well-being of Pacific and Timor-Leste workers in Australia is a top priority for the Australian government. We have zero tolerance for worker mistreatment in the PALM scheme. We take all allegations of workers' mistreatment seriously and promptly investigate. All Palm Scheme workers have the same workplace rights and protections as Australian workers. However, we recognise that our palm workers coming from overseas and as low and semi-skilled workers have particular vulnerabilities. That's why our palm scheme has additional wraparounds and supports for our palm workers. The Australian government has invested to strengthen these. They took a decision to guarantee minimum income equivalent to 120 hours of work over a 4-week period for our short-term workers. Full-time work is a requirement for our long-term workers. Palm workers have a minimum take-home pay of $200 a week. When they are offered less than 20 hours of work a week, our employers are required to cover the cost of their accommodation and transport. But it's more than just that. We're investing in looking after the well-being of our palm workers. We have made mandatory cultural competency training for all of our employees. We require our employees to appoint their own welfare officers, and the Australian government is funding a network of country liaison officers, people who are at the forefront of communicating and liaising with our Palm Scheme workers wherever they're located in Australia. But we understand the challenge of workers being away from loved ones, and this is particularly the case for our long-term cohort, which we think of as the skilled cohort, which can be a 4-year commitment. We're very proud of the fact that we've been able to initiate what we call a family accompaniment pilot. Under this pilot, up to 200 long-term workers can bring their immediate family members to Australia. The families that are participating have access to important benefits and supports during their stay in Australia. I'm delighted to say that all of the families that have arrived in Australia all have enrolled in Medicare, all of their children are enrolled in our schools, and all of the spouses and the partners who want to work have been able to find work. I was delighted to receive a copy of a letter from the Tamworth South Public School principal. She wrote to a Palm family whose children had started at her school. And in her letter, she described the impact the children had already had on that school, how they had enriched the culture of that school. She also advised the parents that she was able to obtain new resourcing, a dedicated teacher's aide who was able to support those Palm children to integrate into their new school. The Albanese government has also taken an innovative step on mobility under our Fallapelli Union with Tuvalu. As part of this, Australia is supporting Tuvalu's adaptation efforts to enable its people to continue to live and thrive in their territory in the face of the existential threat posed by climate change. At the same time, as climate change impacts worsen, we believe the people of Tuvalu deserve the choice to live, study and work elsewhere. Australia has committed to provide a special pathway for citizens of Tuvalu to come to Australia with access to Australian government services and supports that will enable human mobility with dignity. The pathway will provide up to 280 Tuvaluan citizens annually with the choice to live, work or study in Australia, with special provisions to facilitate their movement between our two countries. In addition to creating new mobility options, we've also been working to streamline visa arrangements to make travelling to Australia easier and more affordable for people from the region. We've allocated additional resources to process short-term visas for Pacific nationals visiting Australia, including establishing dedicated Pacific Service Centre arrangements with posted visa offices in Suva, Port Vila and Port Moresby. These arrangements have helped to improve median visitor visa processing times for Pacific countries, falling from 43 days in October 2022 to just 6 days in April 2025. We've also exempted Pacific students from an increase to the student visa application charge that was introduced last year. The Pacific was the only region to receive this exemption. By improving mobility opportunities, streamlining visa arrangements and improving access, Australia is promoting deeper Pacific integration. but we're just one piece of the puzzle. Intra-regional mobility is something we think warrants deeper consideration. Australia will continue to play its part. Again, in the words of our Foreign Minister, Australia is a country the Pacific can count on. Vinaka, and thank you.
Thank you very much for that very interesting presentation. I'm hoping that Stephen is listening online because he would have found that extremely interesting as well. We've got time for a few questions, maybe about 5 minutes. So if there are questions, have we got somebody with a mic somewhere? Please just state your name and also please just, keep it short and sweet. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is John Auger, and I'm at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And my question is if you could provide some insights on how the 280 number came about for the Fale Pila Union. Thank you.
You just get the thing. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So it was part of our Fale Pila Union agreement. I was involved in that negotiation. So it's a holistic agreement. It's not just about mobility. It's a range of commitments. So the 280 figure, it was agreed between the Australian government and the Tuvalu government. I should say that's the starting point. We decided through the negotiations that we both needed to see how that pathway would operationalise, how many people would take it up. The Tuvalu government certainly had a focus on ensuring that its adaptation efforts were supported, so people had the option to actually stay in Tuvalu. You can imagine the Tuvalu government didn't want all of its population migrating away from Tuvalu, so it was striking that balance, but also building in the flexibility. So that 280 isn't a hard number, it's something that we'll continue to discuss with the Tuvalu government. We're just about to open up the pathway, so we'll be in our first year, and I think through that we'll get a lot more data and evidence to inform how we take that pathway forward.
Oh, we've got a question up the back. Second row.
Morning to Ogeta, Natasha from the ANU. I think everyone is, freer migration in the region is a hot topic. And I guess my question is very specific because the success of the PEV also is based on the ability of the applicants to receive a visa grant. So my question is, out of the 3,000 visas that are on offer and that applicants have applied for, including their secondary applicants, what is the total number of visa grants issued so far?
Thank you. That is a specific question. It's just over 600. To be honest, it's lower than where we would want to be at this point in our first program year, and for a number of reasons. What I would say is we have run multiple ballots throughout the year. So the first one was in June last year, but then we've ran up to half a dozen more ballots since then to give more people the opportunity to apply for the visa. And you're right, once you secure a ballot spot, you then have to apply for the visa and you need to meet the requirements of that visa. Some of those requirements are things like you need evidence of an ongoing job in Australia. We need our PEV holders to be able to support themselves, notwithstanding all of the Australian government's supports they will receive when they arrive in Australia. But they also need basic documentation, things like a passport. They need to have health checks. They need a police check. So things that are pretty familiar part of our visa system, and that's where we're faced what I'd call some of these systemic issues. People are quite frankly finding it challenging to get some of those base documents. Really encouragingly, and I look at these statistics every week, I looked at them on Friday just before I came here, we now have applications that almost meet that $3,000 figure, that 3,000 visa figure. It's a question for us, though, as we process those, how many we can turn into grants. People can submit a PEV visa application simply with a passport, and then we allow them time to gather all the other documentation that they need. So in the process now of going back and forth with those applicants to help them to obtain the documentation that they didn't have when they've submitted their visa request. So I'm really hoping as we go through that process that we can increase that grant number and get it as close to 3,000 as we possibly can. We are about to commence the second year of the PEV program, so there'll be 3,000 visas available in that second year as well. So in addition to trying to turn as many applications into grants from this year's group, we're also really keen, quite frankly, to work with Pacific Island governments themselves to see what we can do to support them to be able to provide those base documents to people who want to apply for the PEV. Thank you.
There's one right at the back, and then we'll take Lindy down the front. Yeah.
Good morning, Rukmani Gounder from Massey University. I'm just wondering, in terms of the income that they earn and plus all the expenses that is to be paid, say living cost, food, and such things of that nature. But what sort of proportion would they be able to take back that money or remit that money back home? What proportion after all the costs they have paid in Australia? Just to give a ballpark of whether coming and using that much of their time and, away from home and all that, what sort of income they would be able to take back?
The PEV visa holders or the palm workers? I can speak to both if you like.
No, like if any RSE worker comes along, there's a certain proportion of the tax they would be paying.
Yeah.
And certain percentage in terms of the cost of living and all of that.
Okay.
So just a ballpark
Yeah,
figure
sure.
in case of your idea, given that these are the resources that are being provided to them.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the palm and then I'll move to the PEV. So as I said, for our palm workers, they're on average able to save or remit, it's their choice, $1,500 a month. Anyone who's from Australia knows the cost of living pressures in Australia are pretty fierce. But our data shows that our palm workers are actually able to save and remit more now than they were 3 years ago, which is really, really terrific. For PEV holders, they're permanent residents of Australia. We run a ballot very deliberately so it's fair and transparent. And what that means is anyone can apply for a PEV. We don't have a minimum skill requirement, so they can be professionals, they can be palm workers moving on to a PEV, for example. So their earning capacity is really varied and linked to the job opportunities that they're able to secure. So their savings will, I think, be dependent on their earning capacity. But again, as permanent residents, it's entirely their decisions on what they choose to save, what they choose to remit, what they choose to enjoy living life in Australia, perhaps. So we haven't really done those estimates because it will come down to individual choices and circumstances.
Lindy?
Hello, it's Lindy Keenan from the Australian National University. Down the front, Jan. Hello. Thank you for your address this morning. I was just interested to know a little bit more about the family accompaniment pilot, especially around timeframes. I know there's a quite intense monitoring system to see how those families go, but just wondering when, the pilot is expected to end and when the Australian government is expecting to be able to make decisions about, where to from here.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. So our first family started to arrive earlier this year, and it is the long-term cohort. So they'll be here for 4 years and be supported throughout that journey, and hopefully when they go home as well. We will start that monitoring and evaluation process pretty quickly, just in a few months' time. And then we will continue to monitor and evaluate throughout their time here. That doesn't mean we can't, our ministers, and it is a ministerial decision for us, can't make decisions in the meantime, but we need to have that data and evidence to do that. It really is quite a special program, and to be perfectly honest, I can't imagine that it's something that we could have done in years gone past. It's not without cost to the Australian government, the fact that those families are accessing our education and health system and receiving those government supports, childcare subsidy, etc., which is really important, right? It would be difficult for them to thrive in Australia without those supports, but they are costly. So we need to really demonstrate the effectiveness of that pilot. As I said, anecdotally, just from what I'm hearing from my team on the experience so far, it's all so positive. I mean, those families, those children, the partners, and I'm sure the palm workers themselves are absolutely thriving. So I hope that stays the case, and I hope we can do more in the future.
We'll just take one more at the back next to Rukmani there.
Yeah, thank you, madam, for your time. I was listening to you and I heard the word family, and you also said it's a win-win-win. But I would like to know who is really winning in this, because it's like we are talking a lot about numbers. I'm talking specifically about the PALM scheme that's running. And I was just reading yesterday about this worker who died, Christine from Fiji. So it's like when you say challenges, what challenges are you talking about in terms of getting visas? Or when you read in the Fiji media, they talk about it has been labeled as modern day slavery and exploitation. And so my question basically is, I'm speaking not just for the Fijians, but Tongans, Samoans, because I know personally people who, there was something on Facebook that people were receiving $20. They don't even have money to send money back home, not even money. People are sending money from the islands to, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but like we are not just numbers and figures, you know. I don't know, I mean, why now? Why the PALM scheme has shown now? Is it just to counter China's influence in the Pacific? Just to be honest on this, huh? And so my question basically is, what is Australia government doing to punish those employees? Has anyone been prosecuted? And what are the challenges? Do you mean it's just visa requirements, or challenges as racism? What are they being told? They're suck it up. This is normal in Australia. So I mean that we don't see family doesn't function like that. So you know, Pacific Islanders, we are very cultured people. So sometimes we are not confrontational. Like we see that as being respect. But I believe that these are things that need to be discussed, as it's not always a win-win-win. You know, when someone dies, is there a challenge? Like you know, what are the risks? Is death is a risk, you know, and challenge? I'm sorry if some of you are uncomfortable about this, but I have to bring this up, you know, like this is the reality, what's happening on the ground.
Thank you. We're
Thank
just,
you.
yeah, we're short on time. So.
Sorry, no, thank you for your question, and don't be sorry at all about bringing it up. This is exactly the forum to do that. So I am confident PALM is that win-win-win, but as you say, it's not a win for everyone. Sadly, we do have palm worker deaths in Australia. I looked at those statistics recently, and since the program's inception, there's been just over 90 palm worker deaths. That's 90 too many. Only one of those deaths has been in the workplace. Other deaths have been through health reasons. Car accidents is a big problem, driving on our country roads. It's something that we're providing additional training for our palm workers on. The rate of workplace deaths for palm workers, though, is actually much, much lower than for the rest of the Australian workforce. So as I say, one worker death is too many, but it is less than the rest of Australia. As to the impact on families, again, it comes down to individual choices. I think people who want to come to Australia under our PALM scheme do really need to think carefully about what is best for them and their family. There's a choice also on whether they would like to come down under our short-term stream, which is 9 months, so a shorter period away from home, or our longer-term stream, which is 4 years. That's a long time to be away from home. But the longer-term stream is the stream where they can upskill where they can obtain those formal qualifications. So it's an individual choice and it's not an easy one. We are doing more to support workers and their families throughout their labour mobility journeys, and not just when they're in Australia, but better preparing them and their families prior to their departure. So really, important things like developing a financial plan, having an understanding how much money that a family member might be able to send home, understanding how they're going to stay in contact with each other and communicate with each other. At the other end, we're also doing better, I hope, and intend to do more on helping workers to reintegrate, reintegrating with their families in their communities, but also being able to put the skills and experience that they gained in Australia to use back in their home countries. You mentioned modern day slavery, and I'm glad that you did. It's an issue that is really being debated and considered in Australia. And just this week, one of our states, New South Wales, had a parliamentary inquiry into modern slavery in Australia. It wasn't specific to the PALM scheme, but certainly the PALM scheme was considered in that context. We also had the UN Special Rapporteur on modern slavery do a report on Australia and actually visit Australia. I met with him late last year. And really reassuringly for me, our starting point was exactly the same. We could both see the enormous opportunities for the Pacific and Timor-Leste in our PALM scheme, but also the responsibility the Australian government has to protect our PALM workers from modern slavery risks. When I look at the reports and the evidence, including from our New South Wales parliamentary inquiry, what they're really looking at is that cohort of workers who have disengaged from our PALM scheme. And that's really important because when workers disengage from our PALM scheme, they lose access to the wraparounds and the supports that we provide our PALM workers. And that does make them vulnerable in our communities. They're there illegally, they're working illegally, they don't have those government supports. So we're working really hard with our partner governments to do what we can to try and bring those disengagement numbers down. One of the first things we did was to look at why our workers are disengaging. And they were disengaging for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it was because they were being mistreated quite fairly, but often that wasn't the case. Often they were receiving, quite frankly, misinformation that suggested there might have been better opportunities for them elsewhere in Australia, which really is not the case. So having understood better why workers were disengaging, we've been able to respond to that, and I think combined with the additional worker welfare and wellbeing protections we've introduced, we've really been able to bring those disengagement numbers down. So in 2023, they were about 10% of our PALM force disengaged. In 23-24, we halved that to 5%. And the statistics I've seen so far this year, it's well below that. It's already less than a quarter of that. So that's a really terrific sign for me. But let me come back to just, I think, the fundamental proposition of your comments that it's not a win-win-win for everyone. And just to acknowledge that is the case. We want it to be a win for every single PALM worker who comes to Australia. And we just have to do more and more and as best we can to ensure that's the case. But sadly, with over 30,000 workers in Australia, we won't make it a success for everyone, but we'll certainly do our best.
Thank you, Jan. Can we please thank Ms. Hutton again for coming, taking the time to come this morning? And we'll now turn to our second keynote. Is it good? Oh, it has gone good. I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker. Christina is the Director for Labour Mobility at the Solomon Islands Ministry of Foreign Affairs and External Trade. As Director, her responsibilities include overseeing the labour mobility policies and operations in the Solomon Islands. She has worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade since 2019 and holds a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of the South Pacific. I'll now invite Christina to speak about the Solomon Islands labour mobility experience. Oops.
Thank you and good morning. I think firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge Professor Stevens and the team at ANU for giving me this opportunity to come and share some of the updates from Solomon Islands. Yeah, it's been a good opportunity to come back after graduating from USP. But yeah, I think just to acknowledge the organizing committee, the organizing team. For my presentation, I will share some of the updates on labor mobility programs in Solomon Islands, some of the key achievements, and I'll also share some of the challenges within the context of labor mobility. So labor mobility programs provide an opportunity for average Solomon Islanders to travel to Australia and New Zealand to earn income and support families back at home. With the current minimum wage in Solomon Islands, that is $8 SBD, workers are earning income to remit back home and improve their standard of living and support their families. In the context of Solomon Islands, we have excess trained youths and also skilled workers are going on labor mobility just because the country is having a challenge with employing workers. Our government is having a challenge of creating job opportunity. Thank you. Our government is currently having a challenge of creating job opportunities for our trained youths. So that's why labor mobility program is a priority for the government at the moment. So in 2023, we have an open recruitment drive for 2 weeks, and we received a total of 2,000 applicants. We've screened those applicants and we were able to register 8,000 applicants. And then we were able to register them into the work ready pool. So currently we have 6,500 workers who are queuing up in the work ready pool, waiting for labor mobility opportunities. In Solomon Islands, we have the age limit for joining labor mobility program is 21 to 45. We've reviewed the age limit to 50 years. But just to clarify, for the PALM and the RSC program, there's no age limit to both programs. In terms of economic development, we have, for last year, our central bank recorded a total of $475 SBD, million dollars. This is just remittance from our seasonal workers, which a big increase. You can see on the graph, this is a big increase from 2021. I'll now move on to talk about the 3 labor mobility programs that we are running in Solomon Islands. So for the PALM scheme, Solomon Islands participated in 2012. Back then it was called the SWP for the short term, and for the long term it was called the PLS. In 2019, we joined the PLS, and then this opened up pathways for meatwork, aged care, tourism, and fisheries. During the COVID period, we mobilized mainly our males for the meatwork sector. And I'll show you a graph later, but our numbers, we increased during the COVID period because we were advantaged. Solomon Islands didn't have the COVID community transmission compared to other Pacific Island sending countries. So we were able to mobilize our workers on chartered flights to Australia. For the pilots, Solomon Islands is yet to be part of the family accompaniment and the early childhood pilot. So in terms of the PALM scheme, PALM program management, Solomon Islands, we have a special funded program under DFAT, which is called the Solomon Islands Support Services, a model which really supported the Solomon Islands government to really boost our numbers. Back then, it was called Boost because Solomon Islands government wanted to boost our numbers, so it was called Boost. And then later it changed to Solomon Islands Support Services. We have 10 staff under that support program, and we have 10 PLMSP support staff at the moment. So all policy decisions and approvals were given through the Labor Mobility Unit, but the support and the administrative part of the program, PALM scheme, it's been done through the support program. I think one of the key improvements with our processes and management of the program is the in-country recruitment database, which currently we are using at the moment. It's very efficient in terms of how we manage the PALM program. This includes responding to public, facilitating recruitments, and even we get all our data in terms of reporting, because labor mobility, in terms of data, we find it a bit challenged, but with this system, we were able to efficiently provide information about the labor mobility programs to our government upon request. With the support program as well, they supported the government to host in-country recruitment, where we encourage our employers to fly in Honiara, and then we supported them in terms of their recruitments. So this is a way we encourage all our new employers and also our ongoing employers to come in to actually see what is happening on the ground, and also acknowledging the key challenges of dealing with workers when we do recruitments. Yeah, so for Solomon Islands, our recruitment time frame is 6 weeks. So this is just to show the recruitment process that we are currently implementing in Solomon Islands. So first, We have our requirements where you have to have a valid passport, you have to have age between 21 to 50, physically fit and healthy, and of good character. So if you meet these criteria, and then we'll register, we'll go through the screening, and then we'll register you into our work ready pool. As I have mentioned earlier, that we only do open recruitment at a certain window of time and not run it like every day. Because the challenge for the team is we have to manage expectation, and labor mobility program is a demand-driven program. So we only open it for a window of time, and then we close it so that we can do the screening, and then we register them into the work ready pool. So this is how we do it in the Solomon Islands. So they, if they interested to go on labor mobility programs, they will have to submit the expression of interest. They have to meet the criteria, and then we'll do a screening, and then we register them, and then we record every details about their application. So we get their photos, their heights, their weights, their personal details, contacts, everything. And then we store all this information into the database. Once we received a recruitment plan, these are the informations we share with the employers for them to select. So with the PALM program, different industry have different criterias. So for those going on the farm or to abattoirs, they have different specific criteria as well. And for those that going on to the aged care sector, they also have specific criteria. So we used the database to filter all these criteria, and then we provide this information to the employers. And then they do the selection. Once the employers select the workers, then our unit or our team, we facilitate the whole mobilization through the database. So coming back to very important role, the database is in terms of managing the whole PALM scheme program. In terms of trends, we're still getting our data for us to go back in 2012, but these are just some of the data I received upon coming. So you can see the blue one is for the long-term stream, and the orange is for the short-term program. So if you can see in the graph, so our PALM long program, we pick up really fast in 2020, 2021, 2022, and then it goes down again in 2023. This is because I think mainly we mobilized our male workers to the meat work industry. So this is why we picked up really quickly. And then during COVID, as I mentioned earlier, we got the advantage from other Pacific sending countries because we were the only countries that were able to send workers into Australia on chartered flights. So even though the borders were closed, we were able to mobilize our workers and then got their quarantine period, and then they go on the job. Yeah. And then our PALM scheme, our PALM short stream, these are for mainly for agriculture and horticulture. Our numbers dropped during the COVID period, and then it picked up again 2023, 2024, and this year. For the RSC program with New Zealand, Solomon Islands participated since 2008, and we formally signed the IAU in 2010. For the RSC program as well, it's a demand-driven program. But for the RSC program, most of the employers, they requested retaining workers because a lot of, the RSC program is only for 7 months assignments. So they were able to only request retaining workers, but only few new ones. For the RSC program, it's given the flexibility of the program, the joint ATR arrangement is good for our workers because within that 7 months period, our workers can transfer to 2 to 3 employers to earn money, and then they can come back after 7 months. So with the RSC program, the RSC is facilitated through, we use the agent model and direct recruitment by employers. So for the RSC, we don't use the work-ready pool. We use it sometimes upon request, when employers request, but it's mostly facilitated through approved employers and direct recruitments. So this graph is just to show the number of visa grants that were recorded with New Zealand immigration over the years for Solomon Islands. So we were not able to have data, specific data on the number of people going on RSC scheme. We are working on it using the IRD, but these are visa grants that were recorded with New Zealand immigration. So because a lot of them, you might see the number, but these are the same people going over for the same employers on different assignments. So it will show an increase, but these are people, same people going just a small portion of new workers. In terms of the intra-Pacific labor mobility pilot, I think through the support with PESA Plus implementation unit, they have facilitated the negotiation. And last year, in July, Solomon Islands government and Niue, we have signed a IAU for a pilot for the intra-Pacific labor mobility. This is the first intra-Pacific labor mobility pilot that is managed bilaterally and within the Pacific. So currently we have 3 nurses, retired nurses working in Niue, who will be finishing off in June. We've already done a midterm review in April, and the final review will be in July this year as well. In terms of strategy for growth within the PALM scheme, I think the strategy we use is a promotion. In terms of promotion, the Here to Work brand is something that we really focus on. Our reputation is good at the moment with our employers through the PALM scheme. So for Solomon Islands, we wanted to maintain this reputation to keep increasing our numbers. We also do ongoing media publication for good news stories and just sharing out information to the public in terms of our process and giving updates in terms of labor mobility. In terms of our recruitment process, integrity is our priority, and we make sure our process is trusted with all employers that wanted to recruit from Solomon Islands. The other strategy that we also use is being responsive, and with the support through the DFAT program, we were able to meet this meet a lot of our demands from our employers, because the Solomon Islands government, we only have 7 government staff, but with this support program, we have 10 dedicated staff for PALM scheme. And when we do in-country recruitments, there's funding to support staff with hirings of casual. So this arrangement really supported the unit to fully resourced to meet our employer demands. And in terms of facilitation, again, coming back to the in-country recruitment database, this is a powerful tool, and we've been using it since 2020. Yeah, 2020. So it's been supporting the unit, and it's been a very effective tool in terms of managing all our labor mobility programs. For future outlook for labor mobility in Solomon Islands, we wanted to maintain a good reputation to increase our numbers. Again, coming back to the work ready pool numbers, we still have a lot to clear off. So going forward, we wanted to maintain good reputation just to get the demands coming for Solomon Island workers. We also looking at prioritizing training as well. We have aged care training in country as well. And then we also looking at initiative to increase our women participation. So we have things to DFAT. We also have driving school for females. And in addition for training, we also we are in a progress to implement forklift training for female and females. This is a funded program with DFAT as well. Reintegration, we also looking into sector alignment initiatives. Currently, our cocoa industry is struggling at the moment with workers to work in farms. So this is something we'll be working closely with PESA Plus and PLMSP to help us implement a project on this specific industry. We're looking at workers, retaining workers, and also initiative for worker investments. We're also encouraging local savings as well. We are trying to get our local superannuation organization to get workers to register prior to them going, and then while they are in Australia or New Zealand, they can save optional for them. There's an option for them to save directly into our local savings. And other priorities for Solomon Islands as well, as a forward looking, is we will be looking at other regional markets for labor mobility programs. I think for this one, we have heard some of our nurses are going to Marshall Islands, Vanuatu, and our construction workers are going to Nauru, but these are not properly managed through bilateral arrangements. So we will be going into bilateral discussions so that we properly manage these movements of our workers to these regional countries. Just in terms of challenges, absconding remain one of the challenges for Solomon Islands because our reputation is very important in growing our numbers. So the more absconders we have, then it will ruin our reputation in the labor mobility space. So yeah, absconding remains one of our key challenges. Skills alignment to domestic needs is also one of the challenges for us. There is no proper assessment to identify the types of skills, surplus skills, and the skills gaps for our private sector. Because at the moment, there's assumption that a lot of our skilled workers from the private sector are losing their skilled workers to go on labor mobility, but there hasn't been any proper assessment to actually have evidence on this perspective. Labor mobility being a demand-driven program is also a challenge. We wanted to balance women participation to men, but when we received recruitment plans or demands, specific industry have specific criteria. So this becomes a challenge for us labor-sending countries, but we are promoting women to also have fair opportunity with the PALM scheme and the RRC program as well. And then just on PEV, I think for Solomon Islands, we're still new to these visa pathways, and we foresee only minor impact to the brain drain concept. And given the suited eligibility criteria would be those who are skilled and have the opportunity to explore new opportunities in Australia. So that is how we see the PEV. I think just to end, this is just to show appreciation to the team, to my team back in Honiara, Solomon Islands. So this is the labor sending country, labor sending unit team and the support program. I think, yeah, I think that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Christina. We have actually run well and truly over time. So we will, if there are any questions, please just keep them for Christina and give them to her at morning tea. I know, Sadhana, but we are really over time. Sorry. So I'm going to pass over to Nilesh now to open the first of our panel sessions on socioeconomic impacts. And there are 4 presentations, Nilesh, and you will need to keep everybody. I'm sorry, I've given you far less time for your panel session.
Where are the presenters? Can I sit in front of you?
Yeah,
Where the other? If you can have a brief chat. So in the interest of time, we had allocated 15 minutes. It's 12 minutes, all right?
I'll speak fast.
12 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
So, 12 minutes, you have 12 minutes?
Sorry, I presented 50.
15, yeah, unfortunately, you know.
I tried.
Yeah,
I
please. Yeah. And who was is David here? Minutes looking for you. Given that, you know, we just. It's. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so. This is okay. I see the microphone. Yeah, good morning and welcome again. This is the session builds on from the earlier session and looks at the socioeconomic impacts of human mobility. And I think this is really an important issue because here we are going to look at what's the end goal of labor mobility and how does it have an impact on families and households and the socioeconomic impacts at the household level or the family level. So we have 4 papers in this session, and there is one paper from the 4 that looks at human mobility, demographic change, and growth prospects from a macroeconomic perspective. And in the interest of time, and also so that we don't cut into tea break, the presenters have kindly agreed to 12 minutes in each, and not the 15 minutes that we earlier agreed to. So thank you very much for that. And so that we also have enough time for questions and answers at the end. And I'll now invite Akosita Polota from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Tonga, and co-author Christy Ward, Pacific Labour Mobility Support Program, to start off this session. Thank you.
So Bula Vanaka and Malo Elele, everyone. It's terrific to be here at the Pacific Update this year. Before I begin, I wanted to say a congratulations to ANU and USP on a successful conference and extend our thanks for the opportunity to present. Today, Akosita Polota, Head of the Overseas Employment Division in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Tonga, and I are pleased to be presenting on a recent study conducted in Tonga on the social impacts of labour mobility. We're only presenting today on a very small slice of the study, but happy to discuss the other findings over the break. So the study came about because of growing concerns about the longer-term effects of labour mobility schemes on families and communities in Tonga. Many of these concerns are voiced quite publicly in the media and particularly social media. And CSOs are also reporting a modest increase in caseloads. So the Tongan Ministry of Internal Affairs were interested in understanding more about these impacts and thinking about how can we develop some policy interventions to minimise the risks. When we look at the literature on the social impacts of labour mobility in the region, we see 2 very diverse narratives. The first is that social impacts are wide-reaching and that labour mobility is dividing families and communities with significant implications. The second narrative is that, firstly, people on labour mobility are extremely satisfied with their experiences, and second, that positive socioeconomic impacts are wide-reaching. But what we know from many research studies, including this study and other research that we've done, is that satisfaction and disruption can coexist. Our research questions were focused on understanding what is happening, why it's happening, and very importantly, to what extent is labour mobility contributing to social issues across 2 labour mobility schemes in the region. So we were looking at both PALM and RSE.
The research methodology was developed closely with the OED, and we had a team of 5 researchers, including 3 Tongan researchers, all who live in Tonga, and 2 Australian researchers from the Pacific Labour Mobility Support Program. We interviewed 302 participants across Tonga through Talanoa and semi-structured interviews, so this is quite a large sample. We spoke to PALM and RSE workers and their families in Tonga. We spoke to workers in Australia, and we spoke to a wide range of stakeholders. We were also able to incorporate data from the in-country recruitment database to look at changes in the composition of PALM and RSE workers from Tonga in the past few years. So just a few words about the cultural approach and framework. The concepts of connection and support are deeply ingrained in Tongan culture. Cultural and spiritual connection includes respect, loyalty, maintaining relationships, and humility. People within the PALM and RSE scheme are positioned within this system of support and accountability, and this framing is particularly important in understanding how people perceive and experience labour mobility within a deeply connected cultural and social reality. So just a couple of stats and graphs to frame up the key findings. Firstly, we see from the IRD data that the share of young people participating in labour mobility in PALM and RSE has increased significantly in the past few years. People 25 years and under account for a large proportion of scheme participation from Tonga, and the drop in age is primarily the RSE program, where women's participation is also extremely low. Across both schemes, however, there has been a notable increase in women's participation across the 3 schemes, or the 2 schemes and 2 components, and especially the long-term PALM scheme, where almost 34 of Tongan participants are women. Given that the average rate of women's participation across the PALM scheme sits at about 20%, this is an impressive number. So one of our first findings was to try and understand why do social impacts occur. We want to emphasise here that life events happen to all of us, and life events are not social impacts. Life events that occur during labour mobility are part of individual, family and community life journeys that are unfolding well before labour mobility commences. What happens throughout labour mobility is also shaped by the supports and connections available before, during and after time in Australia. A key theme in the data across all participant groups is that of personal choice, and Jan before was talking about personal choice, specifically the choice to engage in or refrain from particular behaviours and activities. Whakawhau ituitui, it's a personal decision, was shaped by the quality of connection in a person's life, including respect, obligation, and internal or intrinsic motivation. And the types of individual decisions that people made were also guided by access to different types of support. The separation of families due to labour mobility gets a lot of media attention, as everyone in this room knows, yet only 20% of participants discussed relationship stress. The main reasons were due to relationship issues prior to departure, not sending enough money due to work issues, the fear or the expectation of extramarital affairs fueled by misinformation and social media. People also described how others or themselves sometimes engaged in a range of coping behaviours: disengagement, conflict with other workers, or alcohol. This was largely due to work stress or isolation and the lack of accessible and gender-sensitive supports. But these events were not necessarily social impacts. They became an impact when people were unable to access the support that they needed. Interview after interview, people said, "I just needed someone to talk to." The main negative social impact that we identified, and Sita will absolutely talk about the positive impacts, was uneven gains from labour mobility due to gender discrimination. The study shows that women are accessing better labour market opportunities, gaining skills and confidence, providing for their children and relatives, and are sometimes able to leave abusive situations due to labour mobility. Yet participants, both men and women, frequently perceive that challenges on the PALM and RSE schemes were due to the participation of women and their behaviours. Importantly, the increased use of social media to facilitate gender-based harassment and discrimination of PALM and RSE scheme participants was raised by many stakeholders. Social media and Facebook pages targeting labour mobility participants also contributed to wellbeing concerns. And so we see this disciplining of women's participation, which then affects access to support, including support-seeking behaviours, and in turn, the further restriction of women's participation. Overall, the physical separation due to labour mobility was not found in this study to be the primary driver of negative social issues. However, life events are exacerbated and may become social issues when support is absent or inadequate. And so our data aligns with survey research by the World Bank and ANU and work by Rochelle Bailey in Vanuatu that identifies that the positive impacts of labour mobility are far more wide-reaching than the negative ones. And so I'll hand over to Sita to discuss the positive findings and the study recommendations.
The positive impacts of labour mobility, by far the most significant impact that occurred among the participants was positive changes in their personal relationships. Family relationships continued to be nurtured around tauhiva, which is the practice of consciously taking care of. And it does not stop or cease as much as other research on the scheme have suggested. In addition to strengthen relationships between partners, participants also spoke of improved relationships between adult children and their parents. Parents saw their children in a different way, and because of this, adult children gained confidence. Overall, the study also shows that almost 3/4 of participants have improved their socio-economic status as a result of participating in labour mobility. This includes increased income, but also emotions and feelings that from being seen differently by others and being able to fulfill the social, their cultural obligations and their duties. Participants described how they were making progress, being able to make choices and act on them, and feeling proud of what they've achieved because of participating in the scheme. A key finding from the study is that the effects of life events and possibly negative impacts from labour mobility are minimized when people have access early to preventative measures and connected support systems. Schemes participants are often unable to access available support to navigate these challenges and factors in Tonga, Australia, and New Zealand, which the quantity and quality and accessibility of the available supports. These factors are also inhibit the support-seeking behaviors of some scheme participants. When the PALM and RSE workers and their families can access culturally appropriate and responsive supports, life events leading to negative social impacts are minimized. In Tonga, participants discussed either receiving or wanting support from families, their neighbors, the church, the community leaders, NGOs, and also government departments. And for workers in Australia and New Zealand, they're often assisted and provided support from co-workers, the team leaders, the employers, liaison officers, and also diasporas. A key recommendation from the study is that the gaps in existing supports should be addressed through the development of a holistic community of care. A community of care approach focuses on enhancing the well-being and agency through connected and coordinated community-level support and prevention activities. It acknowledges that no single stakeholder can promote the well-being of all the palm workers and the RSE workers and their families. With the recommendations, Tonga is to develop a family support program and also enforce and enhance the biannual government department welfare monitoring visits to Australia and New Zealand and online safety to prevent online harassment and additional full-time Tongan liaison officers in proportionate to the number of workers in Australia, and also engage a women liaison officer. Also a team leader support program, training and debriefing, and finally enhance accommodation audits and deeds and guideline compliance. After the study that was launched in Nuku'alofa, Tonga began discussing the study how the recommendations